What's up, everybody? It's the Starting Five. He's Coach Nick. I'm Ben. Glad that we are on your internet device today. And Coach, let's start with story number one. We're a quarter way through the NBA season. We're already starting to look at MVPs because I guess it's never too early. And I think the three that come to mind for all of us are LeBron, Kevin Durant, and Chris Paul. But I was thinking about three intriguing candidates maybe outside that list, and Kevin Love and Paul George and LaMarcus Aldridge. All three of these guys make an interesting case, but if you had to choose somebody from sort of that outsider category, who do you think you'd lean towards?
Well, Paul George gets a lot of the love on the defensive end, and he deserves it with his win shares on defensive win shares. But usually they don't get rewarded. Players like that don't get rewarded often for MVP consideration for that. And he's having a great offensive year, but let me put this in context. Kevin Love right now is averaging 25 points and 13.5 rebounds a game. There have been 42 guys total in the entire NBA history that have done this. And we're talking about Moses, Kareem, and Wilt multiple times. And the last person to do that was Shaq in 1999-2000. So this is a real special year for someone like Kevin Love. And if you have to pick any of those three guys, it would have to be him.
Yeah, I think so too. And even though you talk about guys like George and Aldridge, who are on the teams with the best winning percentage so far in the East and the West, Love's value to his team, he's fourth right now in the NBA in value add, and that's over 30 points over the other two guys. You also were talking to me about maybe numbers for LeBron James. I think a lot of people think he's the clear-cut MVP, but maybe you see it differently?
Well, here's the problem with LeBron is he is stacked up against himself and his past performances. Right. So when you start to look at the numbers of how he's comparing to last year, Spoelstra is doing the right thing. They've cut his numbers down, his minutes down, and they probably could go a little bit lower than they are right now. He's down to about 35 minutes a game, and I bet you they wouldn't mind seeing him at like 34. And as a result, his numbers are going to be lower. He's shooting amazing, and he's still in the ballpark of having a 50, 40, 80 season. I'm sorry, 60, 50, 80 season, which is I don't think ever happened.
Right.
Okay, excuse me. Manute Bol had it once, but nonetheless, he made a couple of threes. But so he's still on pace for that. But when you look at his numbers, he's 97th percentile overall, which is absolutely fantastic. But in isolation, he's only 59th percentile, which is just a little bit above average. Whereas last year he was in the 90s, and he's only doing it 18% of the time, which is down a lot from when he isolated 26% of the time. So that's really good. They're not isolating him as much anymore, but he's not as effective. But the one thing I do like about it, though, is he's posting up 17% of the time, up from 12%. And he is in the 98th percentile in post-up. So he's really doing well down there. He really is the MVP every year. But when you compare it to his other years, he's probably not going to get it.
I still think he gets the nod. But again, you look at the amount of value Love adds to that team compared to what Aldridge adds to the Blazers, what George adds to the Pacers. Minnesota's not sniffing 500 without the play of Kevin Love right now. Let's move on to topic number two. Kyle Lowry is still in play. It looked like he was heading to New York at the end of last week, and then reportedly James Dolan put the kibosh on it. It was going to be Raymond Felton, Metta World Peace, and a 2018 draft pick. And Adrian Wojnarowski was saying that Dolan nixed it because he didn't want to get fleeced by Ujiri again. So where do you think the best place for Kyle Lowry to end up being will be?
Here's the thing that's weird. I'm not exactly sure why he is this really high commodity. He's okay. He is okay, but if you look at it in comparison, pick and roll is what you need to do as a point guard, right? Minimum 100 pick and roll possessions, he is 18th in the league behind guys like Jameer Nelson and Ramon Sessions. So, I don't know why there's a big deal about where he should go and who needs him or not. He's fine, but he's not the kind of guy that you should certainly get fleeced from, and I think Dolan is correct in that. But I don't know. I don't see why his value, why we're going crazy over him.
Right, and I don't think New York is necessarily the best fit for him. Now, I'm certainly a fan of watching Pablo Prigioni play, and actually when we were looking up a little bit of the advanced numbers, he leads the league in assist ratio among qualified point guards, which certainly stood out to me. I look at the Nets, they don't really need him either. I think if you're looking at a team that's really desperate for a point guard, it's the Lakers. And I think you can find a way to make the salaries match. You can even probably bring Nash back if you want to try and sort of sort things out and maybe get a couple draft picks along the way. I think that makes the most sense. I know the Bleacher Report was suggesting maybe a trade of Lowry and Landry Fields for maybe Nash, Wes Johnson, and a 2019 first-round pick. I think you and I are both fans of Xavier Henry. Maybe you include him over Wes Johnson. But I think the Lakers are a much better fit than the Knicks.
I agree. I almost feel like Ujiri wouldn't do it unless he knew that Nash was going to retire like this year.
Right.
or as soon as possible.
It's certainly looking like that.
Yeah, because that salary is just too high for someone like Ujiri to want to take on after what he's been doing to get rid of the salary. So you're right. The Lakers are certainly that team that would, and I think Kyle Lowry would do awesome in D'Antoni's offense too, as would most good decent point guards. So that is a good fit. But man, that's a tough thing. I don't think the Lakers have that many desirable picks anyway to give away. So, that's going to be a tough one for whoever wants to deal with him.
I agree. From one point guard to another, Rajon Rondo is expected back now in January. Chris Forsberg of ESPN Boston is reporting that he's received clearance to play, get a little full contact practice going. And then I think Brad Stevens said that he could come back as early as January. Celtics right now coach number 4 seed because of just how bad that division is. So how much does getting Rondo back keep them in the playoff race? And if he's healthy, shouldn't they consider trading him rather than keeping him because of this long-term plan?
I think you can't trade a guy like that. I think he's if not the best point guard, the second best point guard in the league. And no matter what his issues were with Doc Rivers, when you have a point guard that really wants to facilitate and pass like that and can do it like that,
right?
That's something. And he can play defense. There's a meme going on. He doesn't play defense well. He plays defense well. He really can run an offense. So that's the kind of guy you do not want to get rid of. I know they want to get a high draft pick, but I think the key is you have a guy in Jordan Crawford that's playing way over his head.
Yeah.
And this is when you want to sell high. And so I think that's the key. And if you want to mitigate, Rondo's impact and keeping their record low, then you could do with playing time, and limit his playing time under the guise of protecting his body or whatever. And so I don't think you can trade Rondo. I think it would be Jordan Crawford be the no-brainer.
I completely agree. I think you have to trade Crawford while he's hot because sometimes you can watch him play for about 10 minutes and he'll score 17 points and he'll be on fire. But he's a chucker. And the numbers look a lot better this year, but you have to consider trading Crawford at this point. You're right. Rondo's a special player. And because of the way Brad Stevens coaches defense and they're a high-energy team, I think Rondo makes a lot of sense there. He's so good at defending on the perimeter, especially with his steals. I think it makes sense to keep him around, and I think he's a good guy to really tutor a lot of those players. So if Boston really wants to get into the top 10, yeah, you can trade Rondo, but you're not going to get fair value back, in my opinion.
And I do want to make a point on Brad Stevens real quick, is that I think that Jordan Crawford's good play this year is a direct result of him and his coaching. And it put him in a position where he can excel. I don't know if they can replicate that other places, but I just want to make sure that we know that this is the kind of job that Brad Stevens is doing, where he can help a guy like that really contribute positively to a team. He's
really impressed me this year, Brad Stevens, just to be able to take control of that situation, and he's done a great job. Another point guard that we're going to be talking about today, Coach, Derrick Rose is back in the news. Mitch Lawrence of the New York Daily News was reporting that Derrick Rose has told confidants that he's worried about the future of the Bulls. He's worried that they're going to lose some of the key players that they have, notably Luol Deng. Listen, I think Rose has a lot to worry about on his own, so why is he even worrying about the rebuilding of the Bulls at this point?
He's probably just sitting around with a lot of time on his hands and thinking about a lot of stuff, and that's probably what's happening. And I don't blame him. It seems to be there's a bit of a ceiling for them, and they don't score easily. And so, they drag guys in the mud with their great defense. They don't score well, and if they get down by any amount of points and it gets toward late in the game is, it's going to be difficult for them to even have a chance to win it. So I can see why there's a notion of wanting to kind of rip it apart. And Deng is one of those guys. He doesn't really score well consistently. His outside shot is a bit spotty, so I could see why they would want to try and sell as high as possible on him. But you're right. It's Rose probably should just kind of keep his head down and work hard and just focus on coming back.
Right, and Rose has enough to worry about with his second knee surgery now on both knees. You talk about the core. Luol Deng, he's a nice player, but again, a lot of mileage on a guy that's going to be about 29 when he enters free agency. Normally we think about that age as, maybe that's not too bad. Deng's put on a ton of mileage. Noah's got chronic foot injuries and issues there. And you're right, they can't score. They adapted their offense to try and go through Rose this year. But last year, sort of the difference is, without Rose, they had guys like Nate Robinson. They had a Marco Bellinelli. They had scorers on that team. This year, it's not the case. I think they really need to consider tanking because they're not a championship team this year. Try and get a little bit of a better draft pick. And then you're getting Nikola Mirotic next year, who's going to be a stud as well.
How much do you think Deng is worth on the open market?
I think there's going to be a team willing to overpay for him. I think you're looking at maybe about 12, 13 over 4 years.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the Bulls shouldn't go over 10. He's about 9 or 10. He's a great locker room guy, I'm sure, but they would be overpaying and getting stuck with anything over 10, and that's why he's probably not going to end up staying with the Bulls.
Great. Let Rose concentrate on getting himself back healthy and let Gar be able to put the guys in place to be able to make something happen. Final story for you, Coach. We're doing a little college freshman update. Jeff Goodman of ESPN and his freshman tracker did some talking with NBA executives to get sort of favorable comparisons for the guys in the NBA draft that are going to be leading off the lottery. Jabari Parker, they comped to Glenn Robinson, Julius Randle, Zach Randolph, Andrew Wiggins, Rudy Gay, Joel Embiid, Andrew Bynum, Aaron Gordon, Kenneth Faried. Have you thought about any of those top guys at the list and maybe considered which team or which guy you would want if you're number one overall?
Yeah, I mean, Parker, hands down, from what I've seen, is just the guy. He's a stud. He has got all the skills he needs. He's got the size. He's got the body. I don't know if he's going to come out. I keep hearing these things about maybe he wants to stay longer in school. Wiggins was on national TV at some point last week or 2 weeks, and I saw a minute of it. And, I got to tell you, he really is raw. It doesn't really have a clue on what's going on a lot out there. And it's really kind of a shame. My mentor, who was a basketball coach who was watching it, sent me a text just saying he doesn't understand spatial defense. He wasn't even hustling as hard as he could. And he really just has a hard time fitting into the team framework. And it's the kind of thing that he's not going to be able to come right into the NBA and do well. I really don't think so. I think he needs a lot more polish. And then you have a guy like Julius Randle, who's, just this frightening beast. And so I think Randle and Parker are heads above Wiggins.
I completely agree. I think Gordon will adjust well just because of how physical he is, and he's got a big body so far at a young age. But watching Parker and watching Randle play, I love the way Randle attacks the basket. I've said this on this program before. For an 18-year-old kid to be able to be that fearless around the rim, that's impressive to me. Parker just does so many things well. I think right now they're the number 1 and number 2 picks for me if I was looking to try and get those guys in the draft.
Absolutely, but there's a lot of guys to choose from, so you're not going to be wanting for talent, even if you're the 7th, 8th, 9th pick.
No question. He is Coach Nick. I'm Ben. This is the Starting Five. We appreciate you listening and watching. We'll be back next week.
No flipping.